Last night, something creepy happened at my gym. Just a quick bit of background. I, like many people, made it my New Year's resolution to get back in shape. So, I've been hitting the gym regularly since early December. I figured there was no harm in getting a head start. Unfortunately, I've had to work crazy hours this week, and by the time I get off work, the gym is already closed. That changed last night, however, when I was driving home and saw the lights were on, and that there was a sign saying now open 24/7. I had previously overheard someone complaining the other day about having to deal with nighttime vandalism lately. So I think the company figured it was cheaper to pay a minimum wage employee to cover the night shift than it was to simply hire a security guard. Anyways, I pulled up to the gym, grabbed my bag from the trunk, and headed inside. I almost turned around because there was no one at the front desk, and literally no one in the gym either. Half of the fluorescent lights were on and there was faint music playing, so I figured the employee was probably on a break or something. So I went to the locker room to get changed. I first noticed the mess when I went to start my warm-up. The free weights were scattered all over the place. Those little bolts you use to lock the weights in on the machine were scattered on the ground. The yoga mats were strewn about. The trash bins, although empty, were on their sides. The cleaning bottles had all been knocked over, and one of them was leaking over a treadmill, and there were jump ropes dangling from the pull-up bars. It looked like the gym had been opened all day and the employee had said screw it to the idea of cleaning up before closing, basically. I jumped on an elliptical and put on my headphones, knowing full well my phone battery was about to die at any minute. If I had planned on going to the gym, I obviously would have charged my phone before leaving work. Oh well, woulda, coulda, shoulda. So there I was, working out like it wasn't anybody's business, letting my mind wander. I noticed the lights would flicker from time to time, but I didn't really think much of it. Fluorescent lights flicker. It's just what they do. I was about 15 minutes into my workout when my battery finally died on me, and I was pulled out of my headspace. At least there was music playing, some old hip-hop song I had never heard before. I migrated over to the weight machines and put the bolts in place and began lifting. Suddenly, the song skipped and started right back at the beginning. I quirked a brow, but then I saw the old CD player in the corner of the room. That would explain it. A couple minutes later, at the same point in the song, it skipped again and restarted. CD must have been scratched, I figured. When it restarted for a third time, I had had enough. I jogged over and skipped to the next track. I could have sworn I heard something in that brief silence between the songs that sounded like a whimper, but I convinced myself that it was just a side effect of a creepy, empty gym in the early hours of the morning. I went back to lifting weights, started getting really into the song, and suddenly, it started skipping and replaying the same line over and over again. Then, a few moments later, the power in the entire gym went out, but only for a second or two. To be honest, it caught me off guard and startled me. I nearly dropped the bar I was holding. The high-pitched shriek that accompanied the outage didn't help my nerves either. And no, the shriek hadn't come from me. As soon as the lights came back on and since the music had stopped, I was able to really hear the whimpers I thought I had heard earlier. They drew my attention to the supply closet near the main desk. I don't know why I grabbed a weapon, because really, it was clearly someone crying, and it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out who it was and why they were hiding. The mess in the gym, the missing employee. Obviously, the vandals came in and scared the person working the front desk. The power outage was just a coincidence. The CD skipping was just crappy old technology doing its thing. And still, I grabbed a free weight just in case. I approached the door, gripping the weight tightly, and loudly asked, "You okay in there?" The whimpering stopped almost immediately, like the person on the other side was trying to conceal their presence. Kind of too late for that, buddy. I shrugged and opened the door, only to find, well, exactly what I thought I'd find. She looked like a student, early 20s, maybe even 19. She had an employee t-shirt and was curled up into a ball in the far corner of the closet, shaking like a leaf and cheeks stained with tears. She flinched when she saw me, and I quickly took a step back. I tossed the weight aside and lifted my hands to show her I meant her no harm. I asked if she was doing okay, and she kind of just stared at me for a few seconds before she got this glint of recognition in her eyes. She got up briskly, sped past me, but grabbed my arm as she did, and said, "We have to get out of here now." She didn't seem all that shaken for someone who had been crying seconds before. Like, she had this really intense, authoritative voice to her. I couldn't help but follow her. I tried to explain to her that I needed to change before I left, but she wouldn't hear it. She only stopped when I pointed out that I had left my car keys in my locker. Her confidence waned. I heard her whisper to herself that there was no time, but she looked like she was weighing things in her head. "Okay," she decided. "We'll go back together, but just in and out. We have to leave before it comes back." The word "it" caught my attention. It was a really weird choice of words to describe a vandal. As she led me to the locker room, I asked her more about it, and her anxiety became even more apparent. I can't remember what exactly I said to convince her to talk to me, or what she said verbatim, but she did eventually open up as I was trying to get my locker open. The gist of it is this. She was working the late shift, obviously. Things were going well at first. At worst, a few creeps made passes at her, but they knocked it off when she threatened to revoke their gym memberships. It was around 11 p.m. and she hadn't seen a single customer in over an hour. She was bored, so she began tidying up, washing the machines, putting the weights back in place, that kind of stuff. She was dusting the top of one of the machines when she heard one of the chest bars come crashing to the ground. She figured the last person who used it hadn't locked it up properly and put the clamps back in place. A few minutes later, the same bar fell again. This time, she put it off to the side and made a mental note to tell the manager that the equipment was broken. As she was rounding up more weights, she said she felt a breath on the nape of her neck, and thinking it was some creeper who had been hiding out in the locker room, turned on her heels and cursed at him. Except, there was no one there. The weight room was empty. That's when things really started getting creepy. She was on high alert, noticing every sound and jumping at every movement. As the minutes ticked by, things began moving. She was sure someone was running around making a mess and then running out of sight. She started looking at the mirrors to try and catch them in the act. You see, the mirrors cover 3 walls, so you can see most of the room just by looking at one wall. She caught sight of a silhouette standing on the opposite side of the gym. She described it as being dark, but without much detail to it. Like a shadow, I remember her saying. Scared but convinced she finally caught him in the act, she turned around sharply, and as she did, she saw a weight being thrown across the room, with nothing doing the throwing. The figure in the mirror was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, as though all hell had broken loose, all the equipment started shaking and stuff started falling all over the place. Weights flew past her. Bottles of cleaner hit her in the back. She then ducked into a nearby supply closet and tried to hide. She could hear objects pelting against the door, but everything inside the closet was quiet. Then, a moment later, she heard a loud knock. And suddenly, the ruckus in the rest of the gym went silent. She sat there in horror for a few minutes before she mustered the courage to leave. But something was blocking the door. She couldn't see very well out of the crack in the door, but it looked like one of the weight machines had been dragged all the way over to the closet and dropped there. Cue to her waiting in horror with the song stuck on repeat, and me around midnight entering the gym. Now, I gotta be honest, there was nothing blocking the door to the supply closet when I got there. I don't know if she imagined it or if it got moved or what. That's why I was pretty skeptical, and why I was reluctant to believe her story. It seemed a lot more likely that a bunch of vandals had just scared her. I was ready to dismiss the whole thing, but as we left the locker room and headed towards the front door, I heard the CD player turn itself back on. And then, the deafening crash of breaking glass. I ran into the gym, only to find every single floor-to-ceiling mirror shattered into pieces, with not a soul in sight who could have done it. Not even some hooligans running away like thieves in the night. The employee walked over and put a hand on my shoulder, asking me to leave. I wanted to. I really did. But I had become rooted to the ground. I swear to you, on everything I hold dear. As I stood there over hundreds of broken chunks of mirror, I could see our reflection staring back at us from every angle. And in some of them, there was a dark figure standing behind us.